Hello, welcome. Anthony Peake here for a new edition of Anthony Peake, a Peake Behind the Curtain. Today I'm going to be talking about a very curious event that took place way back in early 2006. And I'm going to expand a little bit on it because it's really quite fascinating. What happened was, it was a Sunday evening and I received a very curious email from a family living in Serpentine in Western Australia. And the email starts with a similar line, turning around and saying, something very, very curious happened to us today when we were sitting down to lunch. And the person explained that they were sitting down to lunch and there was a knock on the front door. Now, they live in Serpentine, which on the outskirts of Serpentine, was on the edge of the outback in Western Australia. And they answered the door, and standing in the doorway was a Buddhist monk in full Buddhist regalia. And the Buddhist monk turned round and said, "Can you help me? I'm from the Buddhist monastery a few miles up the road, and we don't have access to the internet, and I need to email a gentleman in the United Kingdom. I have his email address. Can you email him and ask him for his home address, because I need to write to him about something quite important?" Of course, the email address was my email address. And they said, "Please let us know the background to this," because they then said that the Buddhist monk handed them the document, my email address, and then wandered off down the road. And it was only subsequently when they checked up to find that there was, in fact, a Buddhist monastery 2 or 3 miles outside of the town. So anyway, I write to him. I then email them back, giving details of my home address. And then I await a message. And about a week, 10 days later, I get an email. I get a letter from a guy called Ekigatu Bhikkhu, who was and is a monk at the Buddhist monastery. And it was really curious. In the letter, he explained to me that the monastery in question is part of what's called the Thai forest tradition, which is founded by a guy called Luang Pa Cha. And it's a very austere form of Buddhist monastic tradition. And they live a very, very basic life. And within the monastery in Australia, there are a group of huts that the monks live in, and there's only a handful of them there at the moment, or there was in 2006. And the background is that apparently the Buddhists, the huts that they live in, get renovated occasionally. They get updated. I don't know how you update something that's very, very austere, but nevertheless they update them in some way or clean them or something, which meant that Ekigatu Bhikkhu had to move out of his normal hut and move into another one, vacate it and move into another one while his hut was renovated. And he explained to me in the letter that he walked into the new hut and it was very Spartan, and inside the middle of the floor was a table. And the table clearly had a wonky leg, because what had happened was somebody had actually folded a piece of paper to make the leg steady. Now, he then turned round to me and he said a voice in his head, which of course I'd argue was the daemon, turned round to him and said, "That piece of paper is significant for you. Take it up and read it." So he unfolded the piece of paper to discover something very strange. It was a copy of an academic paper I'd written the year before in 2005. Was it 2005, 2004, 2005, for the International Association of Near-Death Studies journal. This was written at the request of Professor Bruce Grayson, who was the then editor of the IANS magazine, and I think he was the editor of, and I know he's quite a high official within the International Association of Near-Death Studies. Now, Bruce is was professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, and very, very well respected researcher. And Bruce contacted me because he was interested in my work and was interested in me writing a paper for them, which I did, which caused a degree of interest, not a massive degree of interest, but it did cause a degree of interest within the International Association of Near-Death Studies. So, for some reason, that paper had turned up at the Buddhist Monastery in Western Australia. So, now, just as a very interesting aside here, this is again the curious things that happen in my life. When he described this particular folded piece of paper underneath the table leg, it was something that people use this, don't they? We use these things, it's one of these things that the people do. But many years later, I subsequently discovered, I was contacted by a guy called Vitaly Viteliev, who is a Ukrainian writer who now lives in the UK, used to live in Australia, and has written a series of books, really, really fascinating books. And he contacted me one day, and if anybody is interested in Vitaly, he's quite a small celebrity over here in the UK, in the sense he's been on various TV programmes, and such as Have I Got News For You, for instance, a very popular news TV programme that's been on the BBC. And through Vitaly, who I will talk about in a future monologue like this, but at the moment, just to explain a little bit about, Vitaly introduced me to a guy called John Lloyd. Now, again, John Lloyd is probably a very famous individual in the UK that many of you will know the TV series he's produced and been involved in over the years, from To the Manor Born to Have I Got News For You, to many, many others, Blackadder. The list goes on as to what John Lloyd has been involved in over the years. And John is also a writer. And John had written a book with Douglas Adams way back in the mid-1990s called The Meaning of Liff. Liff. And The Meaning of Liff is a dictionary of words describing things that at the present moment in the English language there are no words for. And the background to this is then, when I met John Lloyd, I mentioned that I bought a first edition of this book many, many years ago, the book he'd written with Douglas Adams, and I thought it was probably one of the funniest books I've ever read. And John turned round to me and said, he said the background to how we came up with the idea of a dictionary of words that there are describing things there are no names for, because just to reiterate here how the book works, what Lloyd and Adams did was they took place names in the United Kingdom and various other places around the world and used them to describe things that, as far as they were concerned, there were no names for. Like, for instance, these two lines that run down from your nose there, they're called your Des Moines, for example. And there are various other hysterically funny definitions in there. One of my favourites is the Start Point. Now, Start Point is a place in Devon. It's a headland in North Devon in the UK. And the Start Point is when you're walking down a corridor and you see somebody walking in the other direction. It's that point where you both know you can acknowledge each other if you know each other. Because if you leave it too late, it's embarrassing. But if you do it too early, you're kind of waving and acknowledging. So the start point is when you both know that you're able to acknowledge each other. Another of my favourites is Mavis Enderby. Mavis Enderby is a place in Lincolnshire in the UK. And a Mavis Enderby is that woman in your past, or if you're a male, obviously, or whatever, that woman in your past that your present partner or wife has an irrational hatred for. And I just always love that. I think Mavis Enderby, and once I travelled through Mavis Enderby and I got quite excited. I was on a business trip with a group of people and I said, this is Mavis Enderby, and they said, yeah, and I just explained them to this. So the book of Liff, going back, is full of these wonderful descriptions. But I sat and had a cup of coffee with John Lloyd, and John explained to me how him and Douglas Adams had come up with this. And apparently Douglas and John were sitting in a bar, and they noticed across the bar was a chair, and somebody had folded a piece of paper to make the legs balance, just like had happened with the Bonahinya monastery. And they looked at this, and one of the other, and I'm not quite sure whether it was John or Douglas that started the whole thing going. Douglas Adams, as you know, is the guy that wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And one of the other of them turned around and he said, oh, look at that, there's a Ludlow. And the other one turned around and said, what do you mean a Ludlow? And he said, oh, Ludlows, the things that actually hold, you put underneath a wonky leg of a chair or a table. And he said, for instance, Douglas Bader, the famous World War II fighter pilot that lost his legs in an accident, he got round on a pair of Ludlows for many, many years. Then he burst out laughing. And it was that which stimulated the whole story and the whole writing of the meaning of Liff and the book of Liff. So if you get a hold of it, do so. Now, I do know that there is a full version of it available online if you put in the book of Liff or the meaning of Liff, and you'll find it. Check it out. It's a great read, and you'll dip into it. And by the way, in my own version, John Lloyd signed a copy of the Book of Liff for me, an updated version of the Book of Liff. And in the cover of it, he wrote a dedication. And he turned around and he said, to Anthony Peake, my latest and greatest Ard crony. I then looked up the word Ard crony, which apparently is a place in Scotland, as to what it was defining. And apparently an Ard crony is somebody that you know vaguely, that you bring up and pretend you know at dinner parties to impress people. And I was thinking, my God, the great John Lloyd is a person that actually considers me to be their Ard crony. So anyway, that's a little bit of an aside, but that's the whole point of this. It's, as you know, it's a crazy association of ideas, which I go from one thing to another. So that's the background to that. But let's roll back to 2006 and the story of the article. So I was intrigued by this, and the Ekagatu Bhikkhu turned around to me and he said in the letter, he said, do you know I've read your article, and do you know you're doing the science of Buddhism? And he said, I'm really keen to meet you because your work is extraordinary. And he said, funnily enough, next summer, in June 2007, he didn't say the book, he said the article, by the way. And in June of 2007, I'm going to be visiting the UK because there is a monastery, a version of our monastery group in the Midlands in the United Kingdom, in Warwickshire, and it's called the Forest Hermitage. And it's quite close to my old university at Warwick, in the Midlands of the UK. And he said, I'm visiting there, and it would be really nice if we could meet up. And I said, yes, of course, that would be wonderful. Now, I was expecting to meet a Buddhist monk, which is what you're supposed to do. He's a Buddhist monk. He's called Ekagatu Bhikkhu. So I turn up on the day, and I get to the monastery, and there's bunting out everywhere. And I thought, my God, did they know I was coming? But the reality of, we coincidentally decided to meet up on the day where they celebrate the Buddha's birthday. And I think I'm right in saying that in Buddhist tradition, the day that the Buddha was born, the day that he reached enlightenment, and the day he died were all the same date in June, when he had enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. And I just happened to be there on that day. So they weren't celebrating my arrival at all. And I do have a series of photographs I took at the time, which I may post in the next few days, showing the event and the monastery. A Buddhist monk comes over to me, and it's Ekagatu. And to my utter astonishment, he was an American guy. And not only that, but he was quite a cool dude. And I discovered that he used to be a roadie with the Grateful Dead back in the 1960s. And after he finished doing his roadieing, if that is the right term, rodeoing, I don't know. But he found spirituality and became a Buddhist monk and became a novice Buddhist monk, which is what a bhikkhu is, or an ekigatu bhikkhu. So we had a long chat, and he explained to me, again, why he felt that my work was of significance within Buddhism. And it was quite a fascinating discussion, and really enjoyed meeting him. And we remained in touch for many years. I've lost touch with him slightly over the last few years, but I must get in contact with him because he was a really, really interesting guy. Again, funnily enough, I dropped him off at Leamington Spa Station for him to go back to London. And I bought him a cup of coffee. And it was quite interesting. You can't hand a Buddhist monk something. You've got to put it down and they can pick it up. Which is again a curious tradition, but of course everybody was looking round at me in this cafeteria and the station, with this Buddhist monk in full regalia. So it was all very strange. But I turned round to him and I said, I don't understand why that article of mine was there. Have you any idea at all how it got there? And he said, no, it's an ongoing mystery. He said, I have no idea how it got there and why somebody had photocopied it and left it there. And as I turned around and I said, well, whoever had photocopied it didn't think it of great interest to them if they turned up and made a Ludlow out of it, the Lloyd and Adams Ludlow, because this says to me that whatever it was not of interest to them at all. And he said, yes, but it was there for me to find it. And that was the reason it was there, which of course I'd argue is Ekigatu's bhikkhu, Ekigatu's daemon, that was pointing him in that direction. So anyway, the story mystified me for many, many years. But as the years rolled by, my book came out and it became quite popular. And I was contacted by various people, but nobody had ever mentioned the mystery of this article until August of 2016. Now, a few years before 2016, I had been approached by a Sinhalese Australian, Dr. Mahendra Pereira. And Dr. Pereira is a psychoanalyst in Melbourne in Australia. And he was interested in writing a book with me and another researcher, consultant psychiatrist, doctor by training, and then became a psychiatrist. And he approached me because he was interested in writing a book with me, or facilitating a book on near-death experiences, because he's been fascinated by near-death experiences for many, many years. So we arranged to meet, and I happened to be fortunately travelling in Sri Lanka the summer, I think, of 2012, 2013, something like that. And we arranged to meet because he was also visiting family in Sri Lanka. And myself and Mahendra, we met up at the Candelama Resort Hotel in the middle of the jungle in the centre of, near Kandy, in the centre of Sri Lanka. We were positioning there because we were going to be travelling to various sites in the area, various classical sites in the area of the classical civilizations of the Sinhalese civilization. And we decided to meet up at this Candelama place. And it was an eco hotel, really, really beautiful. If you ever get the opportunity in that part of the world, do check it out. And it's the location we were at because the next day we were visiting an amazing site called Sigiriya, which is this incredible sandstone outcrop, huge sandstone outcrop, sticks out the jungle a bit like Roraima in Venezuela. And it has a city on the top, a city that was built 1,000 years ago or whatever. Extraordinary location, but again, an aside. So we decided while we were there that Mahendra and we decided we would write this book together, which subsequently came out a few years later. And indeed, the book, Making Sense of Near-Death Experience, we were nominated for the British Medical Association Psychiatric Book of the Year. We didn't win, but we were highly commended. So that was a really nice point. And we had a lot of very famous NDE researchers who contributed chapters to the book as well. I wrote a chapter to it, Mahendra did, and various other people like Peter Fenwick, for example, Paul Badham, and various other people also contributed chapters to this book, which is still available if anybody's interested in buying it. It's not been the greatest seller in the world, but I think it's because it's not that well known. But do check it out if you want to read it. So anyway, we wrote the book together, and it was an interesting exercise. So roll forward to August 2016, and I get a message from Mahendra to say that he's in the UK, and would we like to meet up, which I did. So I made my way into London. And I met him in a place near London Bridge Station, Hayes Yard, something like that. It's a very nice location near London Bridge Station. And we met up in a restaurant, and we were joined by a lady called Dr. Ornella Corazza, who is a near-death research experiencer. And we ended up having lunch and chatting away, and we talked about various people we knew and everything else as well. And it was a really good chat. It was fantastic to meet Ornella, because Ornella is a fascinating writer on near-death experiences, because she's quite fascinated by the links between near-death experiences and temporal lobe epilepsy, as I in my own writings. So it was wonderful to meet up with her. And we're chatting away, and quite by chance, I tell the story I just told you, of saying about this weird incident with the Buddhist monk and everything else as well. And Mahendra listens to the story, and then he goes really quiet and he grins at me and he said, "I think I know how that article got there." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I sent it." And I'm going, "What? This is weird beyond words." And he said, "Yes." He said, "Before I met you, I came across your IANS article, and I was so impressed with it that I decided to send it to a friend of mine. And the friend of his is somebody called Brahmavama Madhathera, or Madhathera, who founded and is the main person, the main monk in the Thai tradition, particularly that version of the forest tradition. And in fact, again, this person is in fact an English guy by the name of Dr. Peter Betts. And Peter Betts is still is once you were always a quantum physicist who was trained at Cambridge University. And Mahendra knew him, and he was interested in sending the paper to him to have his opinion on it. Well, self-evidently, whatever he made of it, whatever Peter Betts made of the paper, he wasn't that impressed with it, because that's why it ended up being left in a hut in the Thai forest tradition, miles away from anywhere, in the middle of Australia, where nobody in Australia where nobody was particularly interested, until Ekagatu Bhikkhu picked it up that significant day, who then contacted me. So rather kind of this incredible circle was really, really intriguing as to why all these linkages were made. And this is very much how my life seems to work. I then subsequently had a wonderful time in Melbourne in Australia. I spoke at an event in Melbourne, Australia a few years ago. And I met up with Mahendra and our fellow author, co-editor of the book, another consultant psychiatrist. And we met up and had a lovely evening in Melbourne when I was doing my talks there. So if Mahendra, if you're watching this or you get the opportunity to watch this, do think that was a wonderful evening. Really, really enjoyed it. So that's the kind of the really weird, mixing together kind of stuff that happens in my life. And in fact, again, quite coincidentally, I met up with Vitaly Viteliev a few days ago, who has a wonderful new book out on English utopias. These are places across the United Kingdom where utopian societies have tried to be set up, towns, villages, this kind of thing. And he features, among others in the book, he features Port Sunlight, which is very close to where I was brought up, on Wirral as well, which is moving to the Wirral link, which we've discussed already a couple of times here as well. But that was very much the background story to that. And I think that probably is enough for today. With one other thing I want to discuss is that I was delighted to discover that my new book on near-death experiences is now out in the United States and in Canada. It was released on the 1st of November and is already selling incredibly well. It got up, I think, to number 1 in the USA in NDE books in Audible, which is astonishing, for the whole of America. So I was really pleased about that, and it's charting also in the paperback category and also in Kindle. So it's doing quite well, and it's generating a fair degree of interest. And I haven't done any marketing on it yet. So this is obviously people who are interested in the book because they know of my work in the United States. So guys, thank you very much for that. And if you are interested in purchasing the Audible and everything, please do. The introduction is worth the purchase of the Audible on its own, because Dr. Pascal Emmanuel Michael, who is a neuroscientist, wrote the foreword. And because Pascal wrote the foreword, when we agreed that I would do the book version for Audible, because as you know, I read my own books, as it were, so I am the talent reading the book as well as the book, talent in raised commas. But because he'd written the introduction, it was logical that Pascal read for the Audible version his introduction, his foreword. So Pascal joined me in the studios in North London for the recordings, which we did over a period of 4 or 5 days, 2 or 3 months ago. And his introduction and foreword to the book is extraordinary. Pascal has an incredibly poetic way with words. And he's also beautifully complimentary of my work, which made me very humble that this guy who's got this mega intelligence, and he's one of the up-and-coming young neuroscientists in the world doing some fascinating research into DMT and altered states of consciousness. He is evidence that the world is changing. That scientists now, the old generation of scientists that ridicule and want to dismiss altered states of consciousness are dying off. And what's happening is the young academics are coming up who are taking a far more pragmatic approach to altered states of consciousness, because their argument is that we can't just ignore these things because they can tell us a lot about consciousness and the true nature of the universe, which of course has been my argument for many, many years. So Pascal reads the foreword. So when you buy this, you will hear Pascal's foreword. Now, on top of this, as you probably know, in Audible, when an Audible book is put up on Amazon, there is usually an introductory section that you can listen to on the Amazon site. And indeed, you can do that in Amazon UK and Amazon USA as well, and Canada and around the world, basically all the Amazon sites. So if you go on and look up The Near-Death Experience by Anthony Peake, and then you go into the Audible section, you will see on the left-hand side, as you look at the screen, there will be an image of the book. And you will notice there's a clickable icon there, and if you click on that, you will hear a segment of the book, and that segment is the introduction or part of the introduction by Pascal. So give it a listen. And if you're interested, please feel free to purchase it. It would be great if you could, because the only way I'm going to get my work out there is by people knowing about it and by telling other people about it. So please, please, please help. If you think my work is of significance or is of importance, which you may or may not, but one assumes that if you listen to this vlog, clearly you at least believe I have some degree of validity. Very little, but of some degree anyway. So that's that. Also, the book in the UK. Now, the Audible version is out in the UK and is also charting. I think it was about number 10 or 11 yesterday when I last checked. So it's also charting and also doing very well in the same categories. The Kindle version is also out. But the paperback is not. The paperback is out in the United States, but it's not in the UK. This is because there's been an issue with the distribution. What happened was my publisher Arcturus had a contract for the distribution of their books with Macmillan's. And there have been issues with Macmillan's. I think the distribution part of Macmillan's, I think, has gone into liquidation. It might be Macmillan's, or it might have been the subsequent distributors they had. And they've had to bring in new distributors, which means that their books have had to be transferred to a new location. And unfortunately, my books, as is always the case with me, I'm always unlucky. It's my books that they've mislaid somewhere and they can't find them in the warehouse at the moment. So they're trying to find them so they can get them available. So myself and Arcturus have agreed that we will delay the publication of the book in the UK to the 1st of December. Now, my intention was, and I will still try and do this if I can, if I have sufficient time, is that I will get up a page. I'll get my web designer to design a page for the new book on my website. And as you know, on my website, you can purchase all my books, signed copies of all my books off the website using PayPal, which I think I mentioned last time. But what you will need to do is that with the new book, I will do the same. And indeed, my intention is, as soon as I get a delivery of the books, which I'm allowed to have them in advance of publication, I will get them up on the website so that if you want an advance copy, if you're based in the UK and you want an advance copy before the book reaches the bookshops, you can order it off my website and I will post them to you. I will post it on the standard price of the book. I'm not trying to profiteer in any shape or form. So you will receive a copy of the book if you order off the website. And what I will do is I will number them via the orders. So as the orders come in, the first person that puts the order in will get book 001. And then the next person 002, and then my signature. So you will have a numbered copy. Now, with my last book, we sold hundreds, literally hundreds off the website. This time round, because last time we had about 2 months to do this, whereas I think we're only going to have 2 or 3 weeks before the book is published properly. But that will remain, and the books will remain on the website if you want to buy signed copies. But as I stress with all my books, you don't need to buy the books off me or of bookshops or Amazon or anywhere. Many libraries will be stocking the books, including this book. So by all means, just go to your local library and order the book. I don't mind. To me, it's getting the book out there and getting people to know about it and getting to know about my ideas and the feedback on my ideas. It's not going to make me rich. And anybody that turns around and thinks that authors make lots of money, we don't. We don't. So don't even vaguely think that I'm making shed loads of money out the back of the fact of you buying the books. And it's never my intention. It was never my intention. My intention is to get the ideas out there and to get people to talk about it and to get involved in it in one way or another. And that was my intention. Okay, well, that's the end for today. I hope you found it of interest with my long-winded tale of mystery and imagination. So again, see you again in a fortnight's time when my subject, I plan at the moment, the subject will be Italian movies. These are movies that I consider to have themes that are based upon my writings. Now, by this, I don't mean that the people who do the movies have read my books and are therefore influenced by me. What I'm saying is that the concepts I discuss, such as the daemon Eidolon dyad, is there life after death, Itlad, of course, Itlad, that's what it means, Itladian. Itlad is literally, is there life after death, ITLAD, which is the title of my first book. And many years ago, we decided that anything that was related to my writings, we called it Itladian. So when we're talking about Itladian movies, we're talking about movies that have similar themes. Now, what I argue, and I have argued for many years, is that we know the facts of my ideas, like cheating the ferryman and everything. People seem to relate to them because I think subliminally people know that there's some truth in it. Because, religious traditions and philosophical traditions have used it for years, but also writers have used these themes, the idea of the eternal recurrence, coming back and living your life again, these kind of things. And there are numerous movies that have exactly the same kind of theme. Many, many movies. And I will be discussing these. Now, again, I'll also give the link after that show as well to a wonderful interview I did with my good friend Martin Higgins many, many years ago about the ontological movie, which is another term we use, movies that deal with the nature of being, the nature of consciousness, the nature of being alive, the nature of being a perceiver in a physical universe that seems external to us. So I'll be discussing these movies. Again, I'll just talk off the top of my head. I probably might be 90% right and I might make errors, but I don't really care. I'm not there trying to do anything other than get the ideas across there. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. All the best to you all, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Okay then, bye-bye.